Hello and welcome. I'm Arjun Vishwanathan, and I welcome you to another episode of Tipping Point. My guest today is somebody who's going to be speaking and sharing his views and perspectives on the whole concept of leadership. Because if you kind of really think about it, in today's dynamic landscape, corporate leaders are embracing agility like never before. They're fostering diverse and inclusive cultures and prioritizing sustainable practices. Uh, they're championing technological integration, nurturing a remote friendly environment while emphasizing emotional intelligence and, of course, adaptability. Uh, you're also seeing leaders today increasingly encourage collaboration and innovation while navigating immense complexities towards fostering perhaps resilient and purpose driven organizations of tomorrow. Uh, Please join me and put your hands together to welcome my very, very eminent guest on Tipping Point, Sanjoy Mukerji, who is the Group CEO of Dr. Batra's Positive Health Clinic and who was also the ex-Chief Commercial Officer at Vodafone. Sanjoy Mukerji, an absolute privilege, sir. Thank you for joining me on Tipping Point.
Hi, Arjun. Thank you.
Wonderful. Sanjoy, I'm going to directly jump into this. The whole concept of leadership. We've been hearing it. I've been hearing it. I've been working 25 years today. I've seen leaders. I've heard talks on leadership. I've heard various. We've seen you in action for so many years when we were all at Vodafone. What really is leadership at the end of it?
So, I've been kind of doing leadership roles for the last 30 odd years.
Indeed.
And the fact is, this question has come up several times, and I actually sat down and wrote a sentence to define, because, part of one of the most important jobs of a leader is to create more leaders.
Indeed.
And to create more leaders, you need to tell them what leadership is. So this is what I wrote down for whatever it's worth. A leader is a person who shepherds a group of people towards the achievement of a goal.
Indeed.
Who achieves a purpose via people and processes. So, the key words here are purpose, people, and processes.
Indeed.
Leader is not simply a boss, but a boss with a purpose. Because if there is no purpose, then there is equally, when there is a team of people working, the person who has the purpose is the leader.
Indeed, sir.
And the person who can shepherd the people via processes and via inspiration towards that purpose is the leader. So leadership is not a designation, it's not a privilege, it's not to do with any of that. It is the ability to have a purpose and to shepherd people towards that purpose via various means. So that's really what leadership is. It's often misunderstood as being the boss and being the know-it-all and so on and so forth. If you ask me, if you ask 100 young people, frontline people, what is a leader, they will come out with all kinds of words and phrases to describe a leader, which a leader is not. I have actually done this survey and just to understand what people think about leaders, and I have got answers like a leader is someone who knows everything, someone who orders people around, someone who's powerful,
Indeed.
Answers all questions, asks a lot of questions, is someone who scolds people, someone who follows up, someone who has all the money or the power of money, has got a designation. These are all the kind of weird answers one gets.
Indeed.
But that is not what a leader is. A leader is, and this is true whether it was 50 years ago or 30 years ago when I was a young leader or even today. What I like to believe is leader is someone who, leaders motivate, they simplify. They simplify the purpose so that it's understood by all and everyone knows what their role in that purpose is. The purpose could be a very tall, complex purpose, but for each human being, it needs to be simplified as to what that person will do. Leaders take the call. There are sometimes calls to be taken, and they have to take the call. I think leaders coach. That's a very, very important aspect of what a leader must do, because that's something which is newer and more important in today's day and age. Being that today's day and age is becoming more and more VUCA.
Indeed.
Today's day and age is more youthful, is more with it, a lot cooler. So uh, I think coaching is a very important part. Leaders influence. This is
Indeed.
something that a lot of leaders don't realize that they need to do. They feel that they need to direct, but I think influencing is a far better way of getting work done than to direct. Uh, just to give an example, in my role today at Dr. Batra's, I have to lead a team of 350 doctors,
Indeed, sir.
and I'm not a doctor, as you know. So a lot of my work, it's difficult for me to direct doctors because I cannot tell them how to treat patients,
So
right?
true.
And what to talk to patients about, because that is their job. And I, whatever I may know in my life, I cannot know that. So influencing people becomes a very important part of my job. And this is
So
something which
that's
is uh, definitely a big shift versus yesterday, if you please. And the two things that leaders have had to do and will have to do and have to do today are, leaders need to inspire.
indeed they do.
They of course need to inspire, and they of course need to lead people. They must understand that those people, that team is theirs, and whatever be their style, it doesn't matter. Everyone has their own personal style. But whatever be their style, they are the ones responsible for them. That ownership, when I say leaders lead, that ownership of their team is vital, critical. It's something that they have to do.
It's actually interesting, Sanjoy, that you mentioned style because there's multiple proverbs that say leaders are born, not made, the usual. However, is it equally true that styles of leadership can be developed and evolved to meet the demands of the organization that you're at the current situation?
So, all this thing about leaders being born and so on and so forth and not made is a fallacy. It just doesn't work that way. And I have the simplest possible example to give. And I have asked this question to many, many, many people that, name uh, the three or four people in your life, or maybe the two or three people in your life who have led you the best
Indeed.
in your entire life at your personal level, in your personal life. And invariably, for 90% of the people, they will mention one of their parents as one of the people who have led them.
Indeed.
The fact is, parents are, not made, they're not born. They become parents by a process of taking ownership for that child.
Indeed, so.
When a mother becomes a mother, no one has to teach her. She
Yeah,
doesn't go through a leadership course.
it doesn't.
Yet for most people, a mother has provided some degree of very important leadership at very critical moments of time. The point
Absolutely.
is, they weren't taught, they weren't born, they became by taking that ownership for that child. And so taking that ownership for the team is a very critical part, the most critical part. Thereafter, everything else comes very intuitively. Thereafter, everything will happen. But if you do not take that ownership, then nothing will happen. However much your style could be, however much be your training or whatever it be, it's not going to happen. So
It would.
I think that is the most critical part.
Because it's an interesting analogy that you bring in the whole concept of parenthood. Because Sanjay, you also mentioned the survey, and some of them said leaders have all the answers, they have lots of power, lots of money, and so on and so forth. Isn't it logically true that with great leadership, and like you also somewhere articulated, with great leadership comes great power, but also great responsibility, fundamentally towards. Let's take Vodafone, for example, during your time. We were about what? About 1,200 people in Delhi and Haryana.
Yeah, I mean, when I was handling North and East
Yeah.
India, I had probably 5 or 6,000 people reporting to
6,000.
me.
Isn't it terrifying at some level? You are directly responsible in some manner or some fashion for their careers, for their lives, for their well being, mental, emotional,
Of
fiscal.
course, I mean, it is not terrifying. It is a matter of taking that responsibility. And if taking responsibility is terrifying to someone, then they shouldn't be that leader. They're not in the right
Clearly.
profession. But the fact is, it is their responsibility. They do need to take that ownership for those people, whether it be their safety, whether it be their growth. That's really important. Uh, a lot of people have since I joined Pepsi way back when I was 25 years old, one of the first things that we were taught was reaching out to the front line, working with the front line, understanding the front line, contacting them and actually engaging with them. Now, when you're dealing with 5,000 people, it's very difficult to do so, and whatever happens happens on an ad hoc basis. So I always feel that how do I get the front line to reach out to me whenever one of the tricks I learned was actually something very simple. um, and I'm really surprised as I engage with a lot of organizations how few people do it. But one of the tricks I learned was to actually wish people on their birthdays.
Indeed, so.
And
I remember that.
and it doesn't take me more than 5 minutes to do so. But maybe I wish 5 or 6 or 7 people. That's the average number of people who have a birthday. And it's probably the same message that I send everyone. But it's so easy. But the fact is, everyone remembers their birthday, and
Indeed.
everyone remembers if I wish them. And the next time they need to reach out and say something, they find me more accessible. So it's just, I think it's a two-way process. But I think the leader has to make the opening gambit to begin that two-way process.
No, I couldn't agree more. And you say this so powerfully because I remember back in the day, I found it more convenient and comfortable to walk and barge into your office that one particular evening, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Years back, when I said I'm tired of doing customer service, I want to do something else. And all you asked me was what? And I remember that chat, and that pretty much changed my entire life around. Now, which is why, Sanjoy, my question to you, therefore, also is how do you know when the next generation of leaders are ready? How do you identify that?
So it begins with ownership. It
Of
begins
course.
with the ability to take ownership. When you deal with people, you see people who are natural at taking ownership, and who are a little selfless, who are thinking more about team than just themselves. It comes out. It comes out in meetings. It comes out in interactions. You get to know that very easily. The moment you find people like that, you find your future leaders. Now you have to then uh, train them. You have to give them exposure to leadership situations. You have to put them in teams and see how they take on leadership, and you have to give them a little bit of coaching. They have to understand that, look, they have that potential. Uh, so once you do that, then they take over. The natural leaders, then take over. And what is natural? The natural is only that ability to take ownership.
Take ownership.
It's like, you will see that in every walk of life. You see that in a traffic jam. There'll be some people who will get out and clear the damn jam for you. And
Especially
others
if
will
it's
be
a
sitting in the
gridlock.
car and
Yeah.
tripping. So there are people who naturally will take ownership. That ability to take ownership is the first step of being a good leader.
Sanjay, you just mentioned, you've now been in leadership positions for almost about 30 years. How then have you seen yourself change in terms of leadership, apart from obviously the fundamentals that you just spoke about, which is ownership, inspiration, and so on and so forth? Increasingly today, as you see a workforce that has changed from, let's say, back in the day when I was much younger, uh, to a workforce that is today more demanding of expectation, more demanding of experience, more demanding of flexibility, more demanding of work-life balance. And I'm not going to jump into the debate that Mr. Narayan Murthy brought out yesterday, saying youngsters should work about 70 hours a
I
week.
loved it.
In fact, when I was speaking to somebody, I said exactly this yesterday evening, and I said I used to have a boss. One day, I was, I think, leaving office at about 7:15 when I bumped into you, and you said, "What's happening? Please go back in." I left at 8:45. No, but my point is today's younger generation, a new generation of folks who are entering the workforce, are very different from traditional folks, perhaps like us. How do you kind of evolve leadership in that sense?
The fact is, every new generation thinks that they're different, and they are, and they are. But every new generation is different from the
The
previous.
previous one.
And I see the debate between my daughter and my nephew. One is a millennial, one is a Gen Z,
Then Gen Z.
and I listen to their conversations, and they're different. They're two different generations actually. When I first became a leader, when I first started working, I was the whatever the generation was of that time. And then when I became and took on a leadership position, I suddenly was dealing with younger people who were different, not very different from me. That was the difference, that they were not very different from me because it was just the next generation. As I progressed, they started becoming more and more different, and that's fine. I think if you compare 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, the typical traits that a leader pursued were a little different. I think the leadership then was a little more directive, and today it's become far more collaborative.
Collaborative.
Leaders were far more decision makers. Today, they need to be decision generators rather than making every decision themselves. And there's a reason for all this, and I'll come to that. Earlier, the leader was essentially the prime mover in the organization.
Indeed.
Whatever had to get done would begin with the leader's gambit. Whereas I think leaders need to be prime supporters. Others need to become prime movers, and the leader needs to be able to identify when something really good is proposed and beginning to happen, and then get into the action and support it. And I think earlier the leader was the visionary. Today the leaders need to be the vision maker. If I know and that's where the thing I spoke about influencing comes in. If I know that something needs to be done, it's not necessarily for me to stand up and say this is what should happen, but it's to generate that decision, it's to generate that vision among a lot of people. So earlier the vision would be created by the leader and then proliferated in a very forceful manner to everyone. Whereas today, the leader's job is actually to influence that vision in 100 different people, so that it all comes out together and grows together more organically, in a sense. I think leaders then were far more paternal, and today they need to be far more friendlier. That's really critical. See, earlier the leader's role was to be the master of all. So everyone was doing their work. When they got stuck, they went to the leader. The leader would say, "Ye karo, wo karo," and the leader would, then the person would go and do it, and all would be solved. But today, because life has become so complex, so you take my organization, for example, we run clinics, which is a whole retail business, where there are doctors, which is a whole medical business, where we also sell FMCG products.
Indeed.
And those FMCG products are then also sold in general trade, which is FMCG business, and it is sold on e-com. So that's a totally new line of business. And then, all the marketing that we do is mainly through digital channels. Now, many of these things I don't know about, and I have never received training about, and sometimes I don't even understand the acronyms. So I am today, in a sense, master of a few. I wouldn't say none, but to be dramatic, I could say none. But I'm certainly not master of all. I certainly don't know digital marketing that well. I certainly don't know e-com that well. I don't know medical practices that well. I understand basics of human beings. I understand basics of processes.
Of course.
I can collaborate with the digital marketing team or the e-com team or the medical team and create processes for them and work with them and get them to actually build the business forward. But I am not the master of all. So because of vast amounts of specialization which has happened and at a very technical level, and that is now proliferated because of eventually because of 4G and smartphones and so on and so forth, and 5G now. and the internet and all that proliferation which has happened, the digital transformation which has happened to almost every industry.
So true.
I think leaders don't necessarily know everything, and they can't know everything. So they have to be able to operate in that environment, and the only way they can do that is to generate, vision rather than be visionaries themselves. Be collaborative, generate decisions, and so that be prime supporters. So that's why the role of the leader has changed. It's less because of the generations keep on changing, and
Yes, it is.
however, the good news is that human beings remain human beings. We are not evolving that fast. So I think that's the real difference, Arjun.
But Sanjay, very interesting that you brought this up, because I had a question running in my mind, which is that in this whole concept of collaboration and so on and so forth, how really should leaders balance the encouragement of innovation, innovative thinking, with the need for organizational stability and reliability in a very complex marketplace today?
So this is the actual problem and paradox of all organizations.
Indeed.
When organizations are small, there's a lot of innovation. They're fast. They get things done. Whereas when organizations grow old, they and large and successful organizations are large and successful because of all the processes.
Very
And however, those processes become self-limiting, and they limit innovation. Yet those processes create the whole success. They create the stability. They create the ability of that organization to expand in a very, very organized way and be successful again and again and again. So the processes help the organization to continue to be successful, but they limit innovation. So that's the paradox. That's the paradox which has always been so in an organization. And from time to time, and I think that is where leadership actually comes in. The leader can play a role in generating this, because it's a tough and very ambitious call. To say that from every 5 or 7 years, the organization has to go through transformation, and transformation begins with generation of a new vision, creating of new strategies, looking for avenues of growth, looking for things that the organization has not done before. You have to get off the peak that you're at and climb the mountain again. And I think that call is a very critical leadership call, and that call has to happen every few years, because when I joined Pepsi, there was to be a leader in Pepsi called Wayne Calloway, and he had this saying, if it ain't broke, fix it. And the traditional call was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
Whereas if it ain't broke, fix it means that generate transformation ever so often. And generating transformation ever so often is vital to an organization staying young, because the typical life of an organization is your typical bell curve, and the most motivated organization is the one which is just before the peak.
Indeed.
And after the peak, what
next?
After the peak, you only come down.
Yeah.
See, very successful organizations have one trait. What I call, they become aristocratic. And ever so often you will come across an organization which is extremely successful, but you see traits of aristocratic behavior in the people. Now you think about aristocratic as a word. What does it mean? It means someone who is privileged, not because of their work, but because someone has done something in the past. Because of lineage, perhaps. Lineage and past privileges. Indeed, so. And they are just inheriting those privileges, which means they have done nothing. And the moment an organization starts behaving that way and becomes like that, the typical traits are, people will talk about, what we used to do. Not what we are doing today or what we're going to do tomorrow, but what we used to do. That is aristocratic. And the moment an organization begins becoming aristocratic, it's ringing its death knell.
No, absolutely.
So that is the moment where a leader has to identify that moment and create transformation. And create transformation for creating further growth.
Further growth.
Because the moment an organization becomes aristocratic, and it's a human tendency. You cannot change that in an organization. You cannot change that in human beings. The moment the organization reaches a peak and becomes really successful, it is going to start thinking in an aristocratic manner.
It is.
So, there are about 5 or 6 very dear friends of mine who at some point reported to me, who I happened to review at some point of time. And all of them have one grouse against me, that in their moment of greatest victory, when they felt that they had achieved the earth, and they came to present that to me, I was unduly harsh with them. And instead of letting them crow with their success and glory, I actually took them down a couple of notches. And that was entirely by design, Arjun. Because that is the moment where if the person starts believing in their own legend, believing in their own success, believing that they are privileged, believing that they are born to be successful, is the moment that they will start creating their failure. And that is the moment they need to be taken down a notch so that they can start building success again. And that's how success becomes replicatable.
Absolutely. Sanjoy, very interesting. And I want you, for the benefit of our listeners who will tune in, this whole concept of controlled chaos, do you think it continues to be relevant?
It is. It's something I wrote, for a dear friend of mine who had taken on a very large organization, and he wanted, and he actually faced this aristocracy in the organization. And I had created this concept saying that you need to create small levels of chaos from time to time. And then what is chaos? Chaos is not the traditional chaotic word or world. It is about creating
certain discomfort in establishing.
It is about creating a distance between where you are and where you can be. And creating that urge to go from where you are to where you can be. And that where you can be can always be defined. And this is a role which leaders have to continue to play for eternity, of continuously, taking people out of their comfort zone and pointing them in a direction of growth and giving them the usual motivation and coaching and guidance and inspiration to go towards that. Because that's how growth eventually happens. That applies at a human to human level, and it applies at a larger organizational level. So that is what eventually controlled chaos is. It needs elements. It needs elements of collaboration. It needs elements of having a shared vision. It needs elements of huge amount of coordination between various teams. It needs several things. But what I've always found, what helps tremendously, is having a superordinate cause. And that's what I find a lot of leaders, unfortunately, today, as traditional organizations are fading and becoming more and more online, and people are becoming more dispersed, and they're not even actually sitting in an office together. Everyone is at a different location. People losing this art. I'm not saying they should not lead the modern life. They should. But the art of creating a superordinate cause should not be lost, because that is a very human thing. There's a very famous author who said that before the agricultural revolution, what happened was the cognitive revolution. And in that cognitive revolution, Homo sapiens actually moved ahead of every other species by the ability of coming together and believing in something which is not necessarily real. So examples of something not necessarily real are could be money. I mean, that paper is 100 rupee or $100 bill because you believe so and I believe so. It's not really $100, right? It's just a representation which you believe in and I believe in. Likewise, elements of religion, elements of country are all creations of human beings. We have drawn lines on a map and said it's a country and represented it with a flag and whatever, some anthem, and then it becomes a country. And then what happens? A billion people can collaborate behind that cause of a country and come together and achieve things.
So true.
Now, in a corporate sense, what is that superordinate cause? So everyone will, there's vision and there's so on and so forth. But there is one other factor, which is the brand.
Indeed, it is.
Brand that you work for. That passion for your own brand is something which I feel is getting lost as an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to create a brand which has that power, that personality, those values, that ability to reach out and inspire each person, that badge value which each person will be proud to wear. That does not need money.
It doesn't.
That does not even need size. It just needs someone to work on the brand, to love the brand in a manner that you create something worthwhile and then you proliferate it and inspire others to love it as much. You have to be an evangelist for your brand. So that is a lost cause. And I really try to teach people that, look, this is something, because once that brand becomes strong, powerful, it is superordinate. It is larger than life. And all human beings, it is the most basic of human traits, like to believe in something superordinate.
Absolutely. Well, it's also said, that you can take a person out of India, but you can't take India out of the person. In that sense, Sanjoy, how strongly do brands that you work for continue to remain?
Totally. I mean, I would not spend 24 hours without speaking about the brands that I work for, the ones that have really inspired me. There's no question, whether it be Pepsi, whether it be Hutch, whether it be Vodafone, or whether it be Dr. Batra's today. Brands have actually inspired me and caused me to really give myself to the brand, and help me actually take that brand and make it really important in everyone's life. And when you make it important in everyone's life, then they all come together under that brand, under that cause. It's easy to say we should build customer centricity. We should build patient centricity in my line of business. But how do you do that? It has to be under a superordinate cause. The superordinate cause has to be created, boss. Someone came together many, many years ago. The first monument that we have found, which was built by nomadic tribes 10,000 years ago, was done for no purpose. But it was done to inspire them for some superordinate cause, which was whatever their superordinate cause was 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But human beings have been using superordinate causes for tens of thousands of years to come together as groups of people to perform seemingly impossible tasks. So otherwise, one human being to take down a mammoth or an elephant is impossible. But a group of people collaborating brilliantly together can. So that collaboration has been the hallmark of humanity's evolution. So when people talk about collaboration today as if it's something new, I just kind of smile saying, yeah, well, think again. So, but it needs that cause. And I find a lot of leaders do not identify, do not understand that this is what creates the team.
Indeed.
And that remains a leader's job, whether it is then, now, or whenever.
Absolutely, Sanjoy. But I do have a view on the clock. I know you've got a hard stop in the next couple of minutes. A couple of leaders who've really inspired you that you look up to even today.
Oh, I mean, there have been so many. I mean,
so many. Well, yeah.
Right from my mother,
of course,
my father. For different things. I think my father taught me a lesson which I have never forgotten. He was standing and having a cup of tea on the balcony, first floor, and we used to live in this very large house. And there was this random guy walking down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to work. You could see he was carrying a tiffin carrier. I was just standing next to him. I must have been 6 or 7 years old. And my dad suddenly said, "Good morning, sir." And so this guy looked up and he saw this guy standing having this cup of tea and wishing him good morning. And he said, "Good morning, good morning." And then he smiled and then he walked off. So I said, "Baba, who was he?" "I don't know." I said, "But you just wished him good morning." He said, "I saw a guy looking defeated, going
Oh,
to work, going to face life early in the morning. All I did is wished him good morning. But I think he's gone forth in life with far greater confidence."
confidence. So
And
true.
sometimes, that
Beautiful.
ability to reach out and just be there and for people is, it's an amazing lesson in leadership, frankly speaking. So I continue to wish people good morning today. And people get random good morning wishes from me, but then they come and said that, "Look, I really needed that wish today." So that was, and I think my mother taught me processes. I think she was extremely diligent, great stamina, and very, very process oriented. And so between my parents, they taught me people and processes. So it's been very blessed because of that. I think Mr. Suman Sinha, who was managing director of Pepsi, was a huge leader. He taught me to actually go out, be with the team. All the basic elements and lessons of leadership were all taught to me by him, by looking at him, by emulating him, by being out there with the team, fighting with the team. It was amazing, all the lessons of leadership that I could learn from him. And the other gentleman I must obviously recognize is Mr. Ashim Ghosh, who was
Yes.
managing director of Hutch and then Vodafone. And he was amazing as a leader because, Suman and Ashim had totally different styles. But Ashim taught me to be mindful of people without intruding upon their lives, without hassling them, but be mindful of them, be supportive of them in their hour of need, and at the same time, how to take people and then build a business out of it.
Business.
That translation of people via processes to a purpose is something which actually came, really perfectly together in my mind via my interactions with Oshim, and also how a brand should be grown. It was again some very object lessons which he gave me in the early days of Hutch. So I would really talk about them.
Fantastic, Sanjoy. That's pretty much time on the clock. I know you've got to run. It's been an absolute privilege speaking to you, Sanjoy. Thank you so much. Hugely grateful and delighted speaking with you. Thank you.
Anytime, Arjun. Leadership is my favorite topic. So,
I know.
anytime.
Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen.